I heard it with my own ears, through the half-closed door of the guest room they had so thoughtfully prepared for me. It was Brenda, my daughter-in-law, her voice a sharp, polished whisper that cut through the low hum of their expensive refrigerator. "He can't keep living there alone, James. It's not practical. What if he falls?" A pause. Then the words that stopped the flow of blood in my veins. "Honestly, at his age, what's the point?" My son, James, didn't answer right away. I heard the clink of ice in a glass. A long, weary sigh. I knew that sigh. It was the sigh of a man burdened by a problem he wished would simply resolve itself. "He's fine, Brent. He's tough. Tough doesn't pay the bills if he needs full-time care," she countered, her voice losing its whispery edge and gaining the hard, practical tone she used for budgeting. "Tough doesn't make it any less of a burden on us. We have our own lives." I stood there, my hand on the cool brass of the doorknob. My knuckles, dark and swollen with the work of 78 years, stood out against the metal. I had been on my way to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Suddenly, I was no longer thirsty. What's the point? The words weren't a question. They were a statement, a dismissal. I was no longer a person. I was a line item, a future expense, a problem to be managed. I turned from the door. I walked back to the bed they'd made up for me. The duvet, a cloud of white, so pristine it felt like it might vanish if you touched it. Everything in their house was like that. Untouched, unlived in. A magazine spread of a life, not the thing itself. I sat on the edge of the mattress. It was firm, orthopedic, chosen for support, not for comfort. I looked at my hands. These hands had built a life. They had changed my son's diapers, then taught him to grip a baseball bat. They had held my wife, Eleanor, during her final, rattling breaths. They had turned the bolts on 1,000 engines, coaxed life back into dead machinery. They had polished my father's old trumpet until the brass shone like a new dawn. Now, they were just the hands of an old man who was a burden. I stayed in that room for another hour. I heard the murmur of their television, the manufactured laughter of a sitcom. I heard them preparing for bed, the sounds of running water, the click of a light switch. They never knocked. They never came to see if their burdensome father wanted that glass of water. The visit was for my grandson's birthday. My other grandchild, Maya, was away at college. It was just Thomas. He was turning 16. I had brought him a gift, a set of vintage wrenches, perfectly balanced, nested in a worn leather roll. My first set, the ones my own father, a man who could fix anything from tractor to a broken heart, had given me. Earlier that evening, when I gave them to him, Thomas had smiled politely. "Thanks, Grandpa." He'd set them on the granite countertop in the kitchen, next to a sleek box containing a new video game console. Brenda had picked up the leather roll, holding it between her thumb and forefinger as if it were a dead thing. "What a rustic thought, Arthur. But I'm not sure he'll have much use for these. A man ought to know how to fix things," I'd said, my voice quiet. It was what my father had told me. James had laughed, that soft, placating laugh of his. "Dad, he can just call someone. There's an app for that, an app for that." They had an app for everything. An app for groceries, an app for cleaning, an app for knowing when your own father had overstayed his welcome. The next day was the party. The backyard was full of people I didn't know. Friends of James and Brenda. Parents of Thomas's friends. They all had the same bright, brittle smiles. They talked about interest rates and school districts and vacation spots I'd never heard of. I sat on a patio chair, a little apart from the main group. I had my trumpet case with me. I didn't bring it everywhere, but it was a birthday. Music was for celebrating. Eleanor had always said my playing was the soul of any party. I watched James at the grill. It was a massive stainless steel contraption with more knobs and dials than the cockpit of a small plane. He was cooking burgers, but he was distracted, tapping at his phone between flips. I remembered the barbecues we used to have in my backyard. An old oil drum grill I'd welded myself. The smell of hickory smoke so thick it clung to your clothes for days. Ribs that fell off the bone. My sauce, a recipe passed down from my grandfather, simmering on the side. James used to love those ribs. He looked over at me and gave a little wave. a king acknowledging a subject from his balcony. After a while, when the chatter lulled, I decided it was time. I unlatched the case. The worn plush interior, the color of dried blood, smelled of valve oil and old memories. I lifted the trumpet. It felt cool and familiar in my hands, a part of my own body. I didn't play anything loud, just a soft, slow rendition of what a wonderful world, something sweet and gentle. A melody, not a noise. I put the mute in, softening the sound to a warm, fuzzy hum. I saw a few of the older guests smile. One woman closed her eyes, nodding her head to the slow rhythm. I played from my heart. I played for Eleanor, who loved Satchmo. I played for my father, who taught me the blues on a beat-up guitar. I played for the boy my son used to be. I was halfway through the tune when Thomas came over. He had that tight, embarrassed look teenagers get when their family does something outside the norm. "Grandpa," he said, his voice low. "Mom says, could you please stop?" I lowered the trumpet. The last note hung in the air for a moment, then dissolved. "She said what?" She said, "It's a bit much." People were trying to talk. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the perfect, manicured lawn. Then Brenda was there, a fixed smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Arthur," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "That was lovely. Really. But it's a little loud. We're just trying to have conversations here." They said, "Stop playing that loud jazz music, Grandpa." Loud jazz music. That's what she called it. Louis Armstrong, the king of them all, reduced to a nuisance. A noise. I didn't say a word. I looked from her frozen smile to my son, who was standing a few feet behind her, pretending to be intensely interested in a burnt burger on the grill. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was a spectator at his own father's humiliation. I looked at the trumpet in my hands. The brass felt cold now. Dead. Slowly, methodically, I wiped the mouthpiece. I placed the mute back in its slot in the case. I settled the horn into its velvet cradle. I didn't slam it shut. I closed the lid gently. I fastened the latches. The clicks sounded final, definitive. I stood up. I picked up the case. I walked past Brenda, past Thomas, past my son, who still refused to look at me. I walked through the house, my footsteps silent on their plush carpets. I went to the guest room. I took my old leather wallet from the nightstand. I took my keys. I didn't pack my bag. I left the change of clothes, the shaving kit. I left it all. I walked out their front door and didn't close it all the way. I left it slightly ajar. The drive home was 2 hours. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the engine in my old Buick, a car I'd kept running for 20 years. The silence in the car was different from the silence in their house. Their silence was empty. This was full. It was full of the things I had not said. It was full of the notes I had not played. It was full of the 78 years that had led me to this exact moment. For the first hour, a hot, bitter anger churned in my stomach. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. Not since I was a young man in a country that didn't want me, but was happy to send me to war. I had learned over many years to bank that fire, to turn it into a low, steady heat that could fuel a life of hard work and quiet dignity. Now, the old flames were licking at the edges of my control. What's the point? Stop playing that loud jazz music. The words echoed in the quiet car. They were two sides of the same coin, a coin that had been used to pay for my irrelevance. But as I drove, something began to shift. The anger, hot and sharp, started to cool. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was something else. It was the slow, dawning clarity of a man who has finally been given a map. They had shown me exactly where I stood. I was not at the center of their lives. I was not even in the warm orbit of their affection. I was a distant moon, cold and silent, noticed only when my presence caused a minor inconvenience. An eclipse of their social calendar. And in that clarity, there was no more anger. There was only a decision. It formed not as a thought, but as a feeling, a settling, like the last tumbler in a lock clicking into place. The door wasn't locked. It was open. When I got back to my house, the air felt different. It was my air. It smelled of me. It smelled of old books and wood polish and the faint, lingering ghost of Eleanor's rosewater perfume. It smelled of home, not a guest room. I walked into the living room. My armchair, the leather worn smooth and soft in the exact shape of my body, was waiting for me. The record player sat silent in the corner. A stack of vinyl stood beside it. Coltrane, Miles, Aya, Duke, my family, the ones who had never told me to be quiet. I didn't sit down. I went to the kitchen. My kitchen. The countertops were worn laminate, scarred with the history of a million meals. The faucet dripped, a slow, steady beat I knew how to fix but had grown accustomed to. It was the house's heartbeat. I didn't want water. I wanted coffee. Strong. Black. The way I always made it. I took out the old percolator. James had bought me a pod machine for Christmas 2 years ago. It's easier, Dad. Just push a button. It was still in its box in the garage. I liked the ritual. The measuring. The sound of the water beginning to bubble. The rich, dark smell that filled the kitchen. A promise of warmth and focus. As the coffee brewed, I stood at the sink and looked out the window into my backyard. My grill, the old oil drum, stood like a monument. My vegetable garden, which Brenda called a mess of weeds, was full of tomatoes and collards. My life, not a curated experience. A life. The coffee was ready. The perking sound subsided, replaced by a contented silence. I poured a cup into my favorite mug. It was thick and white, with a chip on the rim that my thumb knew by heart. Eleanor had bought it for me 30 years ago. I took the mug and walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room. It was my father's old desk, solid oak. It had come with him from Mississippi on a train, along with a cardboard suitcase and a belief that a man's work was his worth. I sat down. I opened the top drawer. Inside was a black, cloth-bound journal. I had started it after Eleanor passed. A place to put the thoughts I could no longer share with her. Most pages were blank. I only wrote when something needed to be made real. I opened it to a fresh page. I took my pen, a heavy fountain pen that felt solid in my grip. The ink was black. I didn't write about the party. I didn't write about the hurt. I didn't write their names. I wrote, a man is not a burden. He is a history, and his life is his own story to finish. I looked at the words on the page. The penmanship was steady. My hand did not shake. I closed the journal. The coffee was still hot. I took a sip. It was bitter and strong, and it tasted like the truth. The decision was made, not in anger, not in spite, but in a moment of absolute, quiet alignment, like a musician finally finding the right key. My life was not an epilogue to theirs. It was its own book, and it was time for me to write the next chapter. Alone. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was quiet. I made my coffee, the same ritual. It grounded me. It was the first step in a day that would be full of steps. After I drank my first cup, I went to the desk. I pulled out the phone book, the real one, heavy and thick with names. I looked under lawyers. I didn't want just any lawyer. I remembered a young man from church, Mr. Franklin. He had given a talk once about estate planning. He was sharp, and he had kind eyes. He'd looked at the elders in the congregation with respect, not pity. His office number was listed. I wrote it down on a notepad. Then I looked up a number for my bank, and the number for a real estate agent I knew from the barber shop. I made a list, a simple list on a clean sheet of paper. 1 Franklin, 2 bank, 3 house, 4 pension. It looked so simple for words, but each one was a pillar of the life I had built, and each one was a pillar I was about to move. My first call was to Mr. Franklin's office. A polite secretary answered. I asked to speak with him, given my name. Arthur Reid. Can I tell him what this is regarding? She asked. A personal matter, I said. A revision of my affairs. She put me on hold. The music was some bland, synthesized classical, a pale imitation of the real thing. It made me smile. A world full of imitations. Mr. Franklin came on the line. Mr. Reid, it's a pleasure to hear from you. How are you, sir? I am well, son. Thank you. I need to schedule some of your time. I'm making some changes, of course, he said, his voice warm but professional. Anything to do with the trust we discussed a few years back? Everything to do with it. I said. I'm dissolving it. And I'm revoking a power of attorney. There was a brief pause on his end. Not of judgment, of processing. I see. I have an opening tomorrow at 10. Would that work for you? 10 o'clock is perfect, I said. I wrote it down next to his name. The first step was taken. It felt like setting a heavy bag down after carrying it for miles. Next, the bank. I had a joint account with James. It was set up years ago, after Eleanor died. Just in case, Dad, he'd said, so I can help you with bills if you need it. I hadn't needed it. My pension was steady. I was meticulous with my finances. But the account remained. A tether. A symbol of my supposed fragility. I drove to the downtown branch. I wore my good slacks and a pressed shirt. I even polished my Sunday shoes. This was business. It required a certain decorum. The bank manager knew me. A young woman named Ms. Alvarez. She smiled when she saw me. Mr. Reid, good to see you. What can we do for you today? I sat across from her desk. It was polished and clear, just like her gaze. I need to make some changes to my accounts, I said. I slid my bank card and driver's license across the desk. First, I'd like to close account number 7438. She typed into her computer. Her brow furrowed slightly. That's your joint checking with your son, James, that's right, I said. I'd like to withdraw the full balance in cash and close the account. Effective immediately, she looked at me, a flicker of concern in her eyes. It was the professional kind, not the personal kind. Are you sure, Mr. Reid? Having a joint holder can be helpful for emergencies. The emergency is past, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. They were true. She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. She saw the set of my jaw. She saw I wasn't a confused old man. I was a client making a decision. All right, I'll need you to sign a few forms. I signed where she indicated. My signature was firm. While she processed the transaction, I opened a new account. Just my name on it. I had the bank transfer my pension direct deposit to the new account number. I set up a new safety deposit box. She counted out the cash from the old account. It wasn't a huge amount, but it felt significant. I put it in an envelope. It was my money, mine alone. As I was leaving, she said, Mr. Reid, if there's anything else, you just let us know. Thank you, Ms. Alvarez. You've been very helpful. Walking out of that bank, the sun felt warmer. The air seemed cleaner. I had cut a cord. It was a small one, but it was mine to cut. When I got home, I didn't put the money away. I left the envelope on the kitchen table. A reminder. Then I went into the garage. My sanctuary. It smelled of oil and sawdust and time. Tools hung neatly on a pegboard, each one in its place. I had tools and they're older than my own son. I saw the box with the pod coffee machine. I picked it up and put it out by the curb. Someone else could have it. Someone who liked their coffee easy. Then I went to my main workbench. On it sat the leather roll of wrenches I had tried to give Thomas. James must have put in my car before I left. Another piece of my life he didn't want cluttering his. I unrolled it. The steel of the tools gleamed under the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. I picked one up. It had a good weight. The name of the maker was stamped into the metal, worn but still legible. They were made to last, to build things, to repair what was broken. I wasn't going to give them away again. They were mine. They were my father's before me. They were a history. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the garage. I didn't build anything. I didn't fix anything. I cleaned my tools. I took each one down from the wall. I wiped it with an oilcloth. I checked for rust. I felt the familiar weight of each hammer, each screwdriver. It was a meditation, a conversation with the men who had held them before me. As I was polishing a wood plane, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew who it was without looking. I pulled it out. A text from James. Dad, you left in a hurry. Is everything okay? Is everything okay? The question was a universe of misunderstanding. I looked at the message on the small screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have written a book in response. I could have explained the slow, quiet ache of being invisible. I could have quoted his wife's words back to him. But I remembered the silence in the car. The power of it. I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. I put the phone on the workbench, face down. I picked up the wood plane. I went back to my work. The rhythmic scrape of steel, on wood was the only answer I needed to give. Later that evening, after a simple dinner of eggs and toast, I did one more thing. I went to the hall closet. I pulled out a small, sturdy box. It held my father's things, his straight razor, his honorable discharge papers from the Second World War, and his old brass compass. He had carried it with him from the fields of Mississippi to the factories of Chicago, and then here. So you always know which way is north, he'd told me. A man has to know his own direction. I took the compass out. The needle trembled for a moment, then settled, pointing true. I knew my direction now. The phone buzzed again. Then it rang. The screen lit up with James's face. A picture from a family vacation years ago. We were all smiling. It looked like a happy family. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, a notification for a new voicemail appeared. I didn't listen to it. I deleted it. The silence was my new language. They had been speaking it to me for years. I was just now becoming fluent. The next day, I put on my suit. It was old, but the wool was good quality. I had polished my shoes until I could see my own face in them. A man's dignity, my father used to say, starts at his feet. Mr. Franklin's office was in a new building downtown. Glass and steel. It smelled sterile, like money that had never been touched by human hands. His personal office, though, was different. The walls were lined with books. Real books. There was a faint scent of leather and old paper. He stood up when I entered. He came around his desk to shake my hand. His grip was firm. "Mr. Reid, please have a seat." We didn't waste time with small talk. I appreciated that. "You mentioned revoking a power of attorney," he started, sitting opposite me. "That's correct," I said. "The one held by my son, James Reid. I want it terminated." Immediately, he made a note. "And the trust. I want to dissolve the current one. It lists James as the sole beneficiary of my estate." I paused. "I want to create a new one. A different beneficiary." Mr. Franklin leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Reid, I'm your lawyer, and I'll execute your wishes. But I have to ask, has there been a specific incident?" I looked at him. He was a young man, but his eyes held an old understanding. I decided to give him a piece of the truth. "My son and his wife believe my life no longer has a point," I said, my voice even. "They believe my music is noise. They see me as a future burden to be managed. I have decided to relieve them of that burden." All of it, he held my gaze. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered something better. He offered belief. He nodded slowly. "I understand. Who will be the new beneficiary?" "My granddaughter, Maya Reid." "And the house?" "Your assets." "The house will be sold. The proceeds, along with my savings and pension, will go into the new trust for Maya, with one stipulation, which is, she doesn't receive it until she is 30 years old. Until then, it is to be managed by you, and it is not to be discussed with her father or his wife." He wrote it all down. "This is a significant change, Mr. Reid. It is a necessary one," I said. "I am rewriting the end of my story. I want it to have the right ending." He worked for an hour, drafting the documents. The revocation, the new will, the framework for the new trust. The silence in the room was punctuated only by the soft clicking of his keyboard and the scratching of my pen as I signed each page. Each signature was a brick being laid in the foundation of a new life. When it was done, I stood up. I felt taller. "There's one more thing," I said. "I need a recommendation for a good real estate agent." He gave me a name. We shook hands again. "You're a good man, Mr. Franklin," I told him. "You're a man who knows his own mind, Mr. Reid," he replied. "That's a rare thing these days." Over the next week, my phone became a vessel for their escalating confusion. The texts went from concern to annoyance. "Dad, seriously, you need to call me. Brenda is worried sick. Are you punishing us for something?" Punishing. The word was so small, so inadequate. This wasn't a punishment. It was a correction, a realignment of the universe to a truth they had long ignored. Then came the voicemails. I never listened, but I saw the transcriptions the phone made. "James, Dad, I don't know what this is about, but it's childish. We had a disagreement about some music. Are you really going to act like this over a trumpet?" "Brenda, Arthur, this is very manipulative." If you're upset, you need to use your words. Giving us the silent treatment is not how adults solve problems. Use my words. I had used my words my whole life. I had used them to say I love you. I had used them to offer advice. I had used them to tell stories of their own history. They just hadn't been listening. So I was using a new word now. Silence. And they were finally hearing it. I deleted every message, every voicemail, every missed call notification. It was like sweeping the floor, a clearing of debris. It left me with a clean, empty space, a space I could fill with my own thoughts. The real estate agent came, a woman named Carol. She knew my house. She'd sold 3 others on my block. She walked through the rooms, her eyes sharp. "It's a good house, Mr. Reid. Solid bones. A little dated, but the market is hot. People like character. That's what they called a life well lived when they were trying to sell it. I want to sell it as is," I told her. "I'm not painting anything beige. I'm not replacing the countertops." She looked at me, then at the chipped laminate in the kitchen. "It might affect the price. I'm not concerned with the price. I'm concerned with my time." She put a for sale sign in my yard that afternoon. It felt strange to see it there, a declaration to the world that a chapter was ending. My neighbors looked at it, then at me, their faces full of questions I had no intention of answering. One afternoon, while I was packing some books into a box, my phone rang. It wasn't James or Brenda. The name on the screen was Maya. My heart did a little jump. I hesitated. I had made a rule of silence. But Maya was different. She was not part of the noise. She was the quiet melody underneath it. I answered the call. "Grandpa." Her voice was hesitant, worried. "I'm here, baby girl." She let out a breath. "Oh, thank God. Dad said you weren't answering. He said you just walked out." "I've been so worried." "There's no need to worry about me," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "What happened?" "Dad's being weird about it. He just said he got upset about your trumpet." I thought about how to explain it, how to distill years of quiet dismissals into a single sentence. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "a trumpet isn't just a trumpet, and quiet isn't just quiet." There was a long pause on her end. I heard the faint sound of her breathing. I thought maybe I had been too cryptic, that she too would dismiss it. Then she said, her voice small and full of a knowing that broke my heart. "It was Mom, wasn't it? She said something she knew. She had seen it. She had been watching all along. Your mother sees the world differently than I do," I said. It was the most diplomatic truth I could offer. "She has no filter, Grandpa. And Dad just lets her." I heard anger in her voice. Anger on my behalf. It was a strange and warming feeling, like standing in the sun after a long winter. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" "Dad said there's a for sale sign in the yard. I'm making a change, Maya. It's time for me to live a life that's my own size." "What does that even mean?" she asked, a hint of frustration in her voice. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm becoming myself, and I don't need anything. But I wanted to talk to you." That was the truth. In all my planning, all my cutting of ties, the one thread I couldn't bear to snip was her. "I'm always here to talk, Grandpa." "You know that. I do know that," I said. "You have a good heart, Maya. Like your grandmother. You see people, the real parts of them." "I see you," she said softly. "I always have," and in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision about the trust. It wasn't about rewarding her or punishing James. It was about placing the history, the legacy, into hands that would understand its value. Hands that would hold it gently. "I have to go, baby girl. I have things to do." "Wait, where are you going? Are you moving?" "I'm heading south," I said. "Back toward the music." "New Orleans?" she guessed, her voice full of surprise. I had taken her there once, when she was 12. We had spent a week walking the French Quarter, eating beignets, and listening to the brass bands that played on every corner. It was the last real vacation I had taken. "Something like that," I said, not wanting to give all the details away just yet. "You focus on your studies. You make your art. You be you. That's all I want. I love you." "Grandpa," the words landed in my chest like a bomb. "I love you too, Maya. More than you know." I ended the call. An ally. Not just an ally, but a witness. Someone who had seen the long, slow erosion and understood the final, quiet landslide. Her call gave me a new resolve. The packing, which had felt like a chore, now felt like a purpose. I was not just leaving something behind. I was moving toward something. I sorted through a lifetime of possessions. It's a strange thing to hold your own history in your hands and decide what it's worth. The house sold quickly. A young couple, eager and full of plans. They talked about opening up the space and modernizing the kitchen. I just nodded and signed the papers. They were buying a house. I was selling a memory box. I kept very little. My father's desk, my armchair, my records and the player, my tools, my trumpet, and a single box of photographs. Everything else I let go. Furniture, dishes, clothes. I called a charity and told them to come take it all. The woman on the phone was surprised. "Are you sure, sir?" "I'm sure," I said. "Someone else needs those things more than I need to keep them." The day before the final closing, a car pulled in my driveway. A sleek, silver SUV I knew well. James and Brenda. They hadn't called. They had just appeared. An ambush. I was on the porch, drinking a glass of iced tea. I watched them get out of the car. James looked stressed. Brenda looked angry. They walked up the path. I didn't stand up. I just sat there in my armchair, which I'd moved to the porch for the last few days of good weather. "Dad," James started, his voice strained. "What the hell is going on? You're selling the house. You're not answering our calls. We've been going out of our minds." "I am selling my house, yes," I said calmly. I took a sip of my tea. Brenda stepped forward. "This is because of me, isn't it? Because of some stupid comment about your music. Arthur, this is the most childish, passive-aggressive thing I have ever seen." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the frustration, the inconvenience. I saw everything except understanding. "It wasn't a stupid comment, Brenda," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "It was an honest one. It was the clearest you have ever been with me." She was taken aback. She expected a fight, an argument. She didn't know what to do with calm acceptance. "And what your wife said earlier," I continued, turning my gaze to my son, who was shifting his weight from foot to foot. In the kitchen, when she asked, "What's the point?" I heard that, too. James's face went pale. He looked at Brenda, a flash of accusation in his eyes. She had the decency to look ashamed, but only for a second. "We were just talking," she stammered. "It was out of concern, no," I said, and the word was as solid as a stone wall. "It was out of practicality. I become a practical problem for you to solve. You are right to be concerned. A problem like that could disrupt your lives." I set my glass down on the small table beside me. "So I have solved it for you. I am removing the problem. The house is sold. My pension is redirected. The power of attorney you held, James, has been revoked. There is nothing left for you to manage." James stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He was seeing me for the first time not as his aging father, but as a separate human being who had just declared his independence. "Dad, you can't just do this," he said, his voice pleading now. "This is our family home. This is everything. It was my home." I corrected him gently. "I built a life here with your mother. You grew up here, and then you left and built your own life. This house has been waiting for me to leave it, too. It's just taken me a little longer. So what? You're just cutting us off? Because of a misunderstanding?" he asked, his voice rising. "There is no misunderstanding," I said. I stood up then, and for the first time, I felt I was taller than him. "I heard you. I heard your wife. And I believe you. You believe my music is noise. You believe my life has no point. You believe my possessions are rustic junk. You believe my very existence is a future burden. The only misunderstanding was mine. I thought you saw a father, but you see a problem. And I have decided to no longer be 1-inch." Brenda started to cry. They were tears of frustration, not remorse. "You're being cruel, Arthur." "No," I said, looking right at her. "I'm being precise. You have wanted me to be smaller for years, to take up less space, to make less noise, to be less trouble. I'm finally granting your wish. You are free, and so am I." I walked to my front door. I opened it. "I have packing to do. The movers come in the morning. It was a clear dismissal. James just stood there, shaking his head. "I don't understand," he whispered. "I know," I said. And that was the saddest part of it all. He truly didn't. I stepped inside. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, and I turned the deadbolt. The click was the last word in a very long conversation. The movers came the next morning. A crew of young, strong men. They were careful with my father's desk. They wrapped my armchair in thick blankets. They handled the boxes of records as if they were fragile artifacts. I directed them. I paid them. I tipped them well. When the truck was loaded, I took one last walk through the empty house. The rooms echoed. The floors were bare. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was no longer my house. It was just a building. The soul of it was in the truck heading south. I locked the door for the last time. I dropped the keys in the mailbox for the new owners. I didn't look back as I drove away. My final stop in the city was Mr. Franklin's office. I had one last document to sign. It was a letter to be placed in my file. It was addressed to James. It said, "Son, if you ever truly understand why I left, and not just that I left, you can write me a letter. Mr. Franklin will have my address. An apology is not a key. It is a request to build a new door. Whether I choose to open it will be my decision. Your father, Arthur." I was leaving the door cracked. Not for him, as he was, but for the man I hoped he might one day become. It was a slim hope, but it was the last piece of the father in me I could not discard. The drive south was long. I took my time. I stayed in small, independent motels. I ate at local diners where the coffee was strong and the waitresses called me hon. I was invisible in a different way now. The comfortable anonymity of a traveler. No one had expectations of me. I was just a man passing through. I didn't listen to the radio. I listened to the silence again. But it was changing. It was no longer full of things unsaid. It was becoming a space of peace. A quiet room waiting for new music. I arrived in New Orleans on a Tuesday afternoon. The air that hit me when I stepped out of the car was thick and wet and smelled of jasmine and decay and life. It was a city that didn't hide its age or its scars. It wore them like jewels. The apartment I had rented was small. 2 rooms and a kitchenette on the second floor of an old building in the Garden District. It had high ceilings and hardwood floors that creaked with every step. My father's desk fit perfectly under a tall window. My armchair looked like it had been born in the corner by the bookshelf. But the best part was the balcony. A small, wrought iron affair that overlooked a courtyard full of ferns and a slowly dripping fountain. The movers had arrived the day before. My few possessions were waiting for me. It took me only a few hours to unpack. I put my books on the shelves. I set up the record player. I put a picture of Eleanor on the desk. When everything was in its place, I made coffee. Not with the percolator, which was packed away. I had bought a French press on the road. A new ritual for a new life. I took my cup and went out onto the balcony. The sun was setting. The sky was a riot of orange and purple. From a few streets over, I could hear the faint, mournful sound of a saxophone. It wasn't noise. It was a conversation. The city was talking to itself. I sat there for a long time, just listening. I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't waiting for a visit. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was just being. The next morning, I woke with the sun. I made my coffee. I sat on the balcony and read a book. Around noon, I walked to a small market and bought fresh bread, cheese, and an andouille sausage. I ate my lunch in a little square, watching the world go by. I felt steady. That was the word. Not happy, not triumphant. Just steady, like a ship that had finally found calm waters after a long storm. The ache was still there, a low hum beneath the surface. The hurt of a child's disregard doesn't vanish overnight. But it was no longer the anchor. It was just part of the cargo. That evening, after the sun went down, I did what I had come here to do. I took out the trumpet case. I opened it. The horn gleamed in the soft light from the lamp. I picked it up. It felt different in my hands here. Lighter, eager. I walked out onto the balcony. The night air was cool. The courtyard below was quiet. The saxophone player from the night before was silent. I put the trumpet to my lips. I didn't think about what to play. I just let the air flow. The first note was soft, a low C. It hung in the humid air, pure and clear. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an apology. It was a statement. I am here. Then I started to play. It wasn't Satchmo. It wasn't Miles. It was just me. A slow, bluesy melody that came from a place deeper than memory. It was the sound of my father's journey north. It was the sound of Eleanor's laughter. It was the sound of a quiet man finally making a noise that was all his own. I played for myself, for the 78 years that had a point, for the history that was not a burden. I played for a while, my eyes closed. The notes flowed out of me, over the iron railing, and into the New Orleans night. When I finished, I lowered the horn. The last note faded into the chirping of crickets. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from a window across the courtyard, a voice called out. An old woman's voice, thick with a local accent. "Play another one, baby." That was beautiful. And from another window, a man's voice joined in. "Yeah, man, don't you stop." My lips curved into a smile. A real one. It felt unfamiliar, like a muscle I hadn't used in a long time. I raised the trumpet again. I took a deep breath. And I played. I have a new journal now. I write in it every day. Today, I played my horn on the balcony for an hour. A young man with a guitar came into the courtyard and played along with me. We didn't speak a word to each other. We just spoke the music. Today, I went to the barber shop. The old men there argued about politics and saints and the best way to make a roux. They asked my opinion. They listened to my answer. Today, I received a letter. It was forwarded by Mr. Franklin. It was from Maya. It was full of her art and her life. At the end, she wrote, "I hope you are playing your music loud, Grandpa. I hope they can't hear you all the way from here. My life is simple now. It is small. It is quiet, except when I want it to be loud. It is a life that is my own size. The feeling isn't joy. It's peace. A deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing your own worth. I'm not a burden. I'm not a problem. I'm not an afterthought. I am a man with a trumpet in a little apartment in New Orleans. And my story is not over. I'm still writing it. One note at a time. If this story found you, listen to it. Someone out there needs to know they are not invisible. They need to know that it is never too late to pick up your own trumpet, whatever it may be, and play your own song. Loud.